Thank you. So I'm from Minnesota, where it's cold this time of year, and I was expecting to come to the tropical paradise here, but it's it's a little chilly here. It's not quite as, but we always like to go south. Other thing I've learned is there's a worship of God and a worship of basketball here. Okay, and I heard the word enemy and hatred more often, referring not to overseas, not to ISIS, but to the other basketball program in the States. So, yeah, so I didn't want to speak the word. So I know this is a state, and this is a region of passions, great passions. And we're here because we have a passion for marriage. And I'd like to, it's always helpful to go a little bit into the program, because then you can figure out what you might say that you weren't planning to say. And so this idea of covenant, marriage, and so a term that I introduced in a book I wrote called Take Back Your Marriage, I introduced the idea of what we've come to is consumer marriage. That we've gone from covenant to consumer. And so I like to introduce that idea and think it through with you a little bit. The consumer marriage is based on the idea that marriage is designed to make me happy. It's a lifestyle. And my spouse's job in this world, this is sort of the opposite of what you were talking about, Stan. My spouse's job is to make me happy. And in a consumer approach, I really evaluate every day or whenever I want whether this is working out for me. I remember in a marriage counseling session, a wife saying, "This isn't the deal I thought I was signing up for." Again, that's consumer marriage. And of course, then we launch a consumer marriage with a consumer festival called a wedding. Okay, and in our modern weddings, and now most people don't actually go into marriage with the idea that I'm only here as long as it's working out. Most people still go into marriage for better or worse, rich or poor, until death. I mean, there's still a lot of idealism, particularly not people can live together without getting married. So there is still an idealism. The consumer mindset comes in when there's trouble, when I'm not very happy. And that's where our broader culture tells us you have to think of yourself first. And you have to ask, am I really happy here? And the turn of this has, of course, been happening for some time, but there was this movie in 1971 called Lovers and Other Strangers, an otherwise undistinguished movie. I won't even ask for a show of hands who saw it. But it's based around a wedding, and it's the wedding of the younger brother in a family, an Italian immigrant family, Lovers and Other Strangers. And Richie, the older brother, announces to his parents just before the day before the wedding that he's getting divorced. And the parents, and the mother is Beatrice Arthur, the great actress, and they're saying, "So Richie, what's the story?" And Richie says, "Well, we're not happy." And the parents go, "Richie, what's the story?" Okay. They're thinking it's adultery or abuse or something. He says, "We're not happy." And they said, "What do you mean you're not happy?" He said, "Well, aren't you happy?" And they looked at each other and said, "No, we're not happy." The father says, "Do you think I run around the street going, I'm happy, I'm happy?" And then he says, "No, we're content." And Beatrice, "Yeah, we're content." And then there's this great line. Beatrice Arthur has this little kitchen utensil, little pitchfork, and she points it at her son and says, "Don't look for happiness, Richie. It'll just make you miserable." And there's a lot of psychological truth in that. If you set out to be happy, you will not become happy. We've raised a generation of children to have high self-esteem. You cannot make somebody have high self-esteem. Okay? Self-esteem, self-worth comes from a life lived well. It's a byproduct. You can't pump up somebody else's self-esteem or yourself. You can't look in the mirror and just affirm yourself every day. You have to live a good life. And here I'm not talking biblically. I'm talking about good psychological research on this. And similarly, we cannot set out to be happy. Happiness in a marriage is a byproduct of loving and giving and receiving, and all the things we've been talking about today. So there is a trap. In fact, there's good social science research that shows that when people are doing a cost-benefit analysis of their marriage relationship, what am I getting out of this versus what am I putting into it, they're in trouble. They're in trouble. It's a sign of trouble. They're less happy and they're more likely to break up. So the ancient wisdom about a covenantal process really does accord with psychological and social science research, that we have to approach this not like I'm buying a new car, not like I'm buying a new house, but that I'm making a commitment about which I will do everything. I will do everything to fulfill that commitment. We still have, fortunately, although it's weakened a bit, but we still have that notion of a covenantal commitment for our children. Most of us still can't imagine a parent saying, well, I've met another 12-year-old. See, you laugh, because she respects me, we get along, she doesn't do the eye roll, and not that the last 12 years haven't been good. They've been very good in lots of ways. But don't you think it's time for us to find, there are a lot of other parents out there, okay? And we're laughing because we know that that is still, for the most part, a covenantal commitment, okay? And that there are tragic exceptions when a parent, and Judge, you do this in your court, there are tragic exceptions when we have to say a parent can no longer be the parent and we have to remove that child for the sake of that child's well-being. These are tragic exceptions. What we ought to think about divorce being is a tragic exception. Okay? Life is filled with tragedy. We sometimes have to remove kids from families. Sometimes some spouses behave so badly for so long that they are not fit to stay in a marriage. And they're not fit to. But these ought to be tragic exceptions. Divorce used to be a tragic exception. In fact, in the United States, through the mid-20th century, 19th century into later 19th century, divorce was so rare, it was granted by state legislatures. There was a bill introduced into the legislature that worked its way through committees, your judiciary committee, right, and then voted on. And in Minnesota, where I've researched this, there were like 5 a year. Okay, so it used to be a tragic exception, and then what happens is, if we make this covenantal commitment, then we're not looking for escape clauses. We're not looking, in other words, with our children, and in a room this size, we have children. Some of us have children who have had serious problems, serious health problems, serious psychological problems, who have given some of us a lot of trouble. This is just in any room this size. This just happens. But we know we have to hang in there. We have to keep working at that. We don't, with our children, we don't give ourselves an escape clause, right? And then this allows for a lot of creativity, a lot of praying, a lot of persistence. I was involved in a focus group study some years ago where we pulled together a group of people who said their marriage had once been on the rocks, divorce very seriously considering, and then they pulled it out, and they have a good marriage now. And we asked them what happened, how they did it. What was so interesting is that a lot of what they said had never appeared in the social science research, because we don't ask people open-endedly. Okay? And one of the things that stood out for that is that some of these people said, we just put one foot in front of the other and outlasted the problems. We just hung in there and we outlasted the problems. They outgrew the problem. Sometimes the problem was mother-in-law died. The mother-in-law who had moved in, right? Sometimes, and this is going to connect to what I'm going to talk about in terms of the work I'm doing with Judge Philpott. Sometimes they said the wife would go to the divorce lawyer because she couldn't take it anymore, that he was going out every night and gallivanting around town and drinking and probably having affairs with other women, and she couldn't take it anymore. And the lawyer said, you go home and tell him he's going to have to deal with me. This was in the old fault-based thing. He's going to have to deal with me, and I'm a mean guy. And she went home, and basically what she said was, I love you, I can't go on this way anymore. You have to be more responsible. You have to come home. You have to be a husband. You have to be a father. And these guys got the 2x4 over the head. So we had a category of men behaving badly who changed. Okay? Now, those were women who did not listen to the Greek chorus of their women friends who were saying, dump the bum. But they listened to a lawyer, and they listened to others who said, maybe you should hang in there for a while longer and give this a real try. The other story I want to tell, was a couple years after I saw that Lovers and Other Strangers movie. I was in graduate school in the 1970s in married student housing, and we had a friend who lived in another apartment whose father was Lord Gordon Patrick Walker, who at that time, or I think he was that time the Foreign Minister of Great Britain, the only British lord I ever met. And we were in this little crowded apartment, and my hair was fairly long then, and he was in his three-piece suit. And he asked me what I did, and I said, I'm studying marriage and family. I want to be a marriage and family counselor. And then he said, I'll never forget this, he said, frightful thing these young people are doing nowadays, throwing away a perfectly good marriage simply because they fall in love with somebody else. Now think about that. Think about that in a consumer culture. If I think I can have better love, which is translated into being in love, okay, with somebody else, this rattles people's sense that they have found, that they understand their marriage. His image was, and it's the traditional image, the marriage is like the Rock of Gibraltar. And if you become infatuated with somebody else, that doesn't mean you throw away your marriage. That means you try to say what's going on, and you try to reinvest in your marriage. But in our research on the reasons why people divorce, growing apart is the highest ranked one. Growing apart. And what people will say, some people say in their justification for the divorce, is that we grew apart, we don't share the same interests, we're not compatible anymore, such different people. And again, that is like saying, I'm tired of playing this musical instrument, I want to play that one. I'm tired of this job, I want to do another job. An entirely self-chosen elective part of life that I'm now tired of. The researchers have talk about, or in my research, we talk about hard reasons for divorce and soft reasons. Historically, the hard reasons are what I call the triple A's: abuse, affairs, and addictions. And historically, those were the grounds for divorce. That somebody's life was so dysfunctional that it compromised the health and well-being of those of the spouse and sometimes the kids. The triple A's: affairs, abuse, addiction. Now, sometimes people can get over those, so I'm not saying just because that happens, people ought to leave. Those are serious problems that compromise the possibility of human flourishing unless people do something about it. Are you with me on that? Okay. So I'm not here to say everybody needs to stay in any awful situation. But the soft reasons are everything else. growing apart, poor communication, sex isn't any good anymore, money problems, in-law problems, kids problems. Now, these can be serious. These are not trivial. When I say soft, I don't mean trivial, because people can be in a lot of pain and not getting along and in conflict about a lot of things. But some of what we've done now as a culture is turn the soft problems into the hard problems. And so, we have people saying, say women, wives more apt to say than men, I don't feel like I know him. He doesn't open up to me. He doesn't listen to my feelings, and he doesn't talk about his own feelings. I don't feel the kind of intimacy that I long for with him, and if you ask her, that she feels she has with her women friends. And then what she'll do is to tell him he has to be a different person. Could you be a more touchy-feely person? And by the way, because you're closed, man. You're closed off. And so what does that elicit in him? So if I'm telling him there's something wrong with him, that he's not emotional enough, what does he do with that? Audience participation here. How does he react to that? He what? He doesn't say, gee, thanks for sharing that. I've been thinking the same thing about myself, that I need to be more in touch with my feelings, and I take this as an invitation, a loving invitation for me to become, how about if I go to therapy with, No! When we get a message that says, there's something wrong with you because you're not meeting my needs, then what we feel is we feel rejected, we feel defensive. And so then he says to her, he's not at his best here, you just want to talk about everything, just every little feeling that ever came to your mind. And she says, I want you, when you come home from work, when I ask you how was your day, I want you to tell me. He says, I don't feel like talking about my day. I just like to get over my day. And so she's applying her standards because her day starts with the cup of coffee and whether it was warm enough. And then it works through every conversation during the day. I'm not against that, but it's like the full narrative. And when she has lunch with her women friends, that's what they do. Okay? The feeling check, the kids check, the marriage check. And the guys, they may talk about really important stuff, like how UK is going to do against Louisville. So talk about differences. And so when we turn differences, now, just to take women off the hook, a lot of men think that their wives should be as spontaneously interested in sex at any given moment, even though they haven't talked to each other in 4 days. Okay? And now the women are all laughing because, yeah, what? Because he's thinking this would be a way to get back in contact. And she's saying, and your name again was? Okay? And, right? You know what I'm talking about. And so then he starts to then criticize her for not being interested in sex and for, having the headaches and stonewalling him. Now, so he's now her critic that she's not sexual enough. How does she feel? How does she react to that? Does she go, that's really valuable feedback. I think I should really be a lot more spontaneous and interested. No! She shuts them out more, and sex becomes a power struggle. So, and these are just ordinary things. My view is that if you have a consumer approach to your marriage, you can take ordinary, soft problems. You could take any problem in your marriage, and you could get yourselves divorced within 2 years by accentuating that difference, accentuating what I'm not getting out of this, that I deserve. I am entitled. Consumer culture is a culture of entitlement. I deserve this. I am entitled to this. I am a man with sexual needs, thank you. I am a woman, just to use the gender stereotype, I'm a woman who has intimacy needs. And if I can't get it here, I'm going to get it. And so come down on your spouse hard enough and long enough, you will bring out the worst in them. And then by the time, and this is the thing, by the time they get to your court, Tim, they are in acute pain. The soft problems have become torturous. But if you back that up 2 years before, and you had a different mindset about this, a mindset that says, this is my phrase, we're all broken vessels. Okay? Every marriage has enduring pressures and vulnerabilities. Every spouse, this is Doherty now, every spouse is a difficult spouse. Everyone. If you accept that, then the soft problems don't get to be the poison. They don't get to be the toxicity. You work with them. Just as you do with your kid who is difficult. You work with them. You work with them. So this is the, for me, a larger cultural mindset that pervades so much of how we think about it. Is that making sense as a way to think about this? It's quite consistent with what you guys were saying. So I've been a marriage counselor for a long time, researcher, and how I ended up here in Kentucky today started with 10 years ago, a family court judge in Minneapolis who was newly appointed the chief judge of the family court called and asked me to have coffee and to talk about something he was seeing in his court where he had the advantage, by the way, he had never been a divorce lawyer, so he had never been acculturated to think that when people show up at the divorce lawyer's office or the court that they must really intensely dislike each other and always going to have a divorce. He was just taking it from scratch. He had been a business lawyer, and now he's in family court. And the judges would meet with people outside of chambers, no robe on, not official, just to orient them, get to know them, tell them about the process, and encourage them to cooperate. And he said that there were couples that he'd meet with who seemed to be getting along well in this very difficult process. They smile, have affection, sat next to each other on the couch. And he said, and some of them were doing so well making decisions. There are 1,000 decisions in having a divorce with the kids. They were doing better than he and his wife could, and he was happily married. He thought his wife and he would have a terrible struggle making all those decisions, in a brief period of time. And so he wondered why they were getting divorced. He never had the courage to ask them, but he wondered. So he asked me, was there any research on openness to reconciling among people who were already in the divorce process? They'd already filed and they were moving forward. And there wasn't any, so we decided to do that research with parents, divorcing parents, in the Minneapolis area. And we were interested in two big things. One is, how many thought their marriage could still be saved even now if they worked at it? And then how many would seriously consider a reconciliation service if it were offered by the court? And I had no idea what the percentages would be. I knew there wouldn't be zero. I knew there were some people out there, because I'd seen them in my marriage counseling practice, people who had filed and then backed away. But I knew they wouldn't be zero, but I had no idea what they would be. And what we found, and you can look at page 24 in your program. What we found is, if you look at this, so it's a survey data summary. If you look at the second Q, or actually start with the third Q, even at this point, do you think your divorce could be prevented if one or both of you works hard to save your marriage? Yes was about 22%, maybe 21%, and no, 57%. So over 40% of the people thought their marriage could still be saved with work. And then if you go back up to the one above, if the court offered a reconciliation service, I would seriously consider trying it. And there we had, yes was 17%, maybe 18%, and no, 65%. So what we had, and then we did other studies on this, and we found across the board using a lot of different measures, and now we have national level data on this, between 25 and 35% of individual parents in the divorce process, well into it. A lot of these people didn't take the survey to right near the divorce decree. There's this subset of people who are not sure this is the right thing to do, and would seriously consider reconciliation service. And then we developed an attitude scale that went like this. The first attitude is, I'm done with this marriage. I'm done with this marriage. Nothing would make me change my mind, even if my spouse made major changes. The second is, I have mixed feelings about the divorce. Sometimes I think it's a good idea, and sometimes I'm not sure. The third is, I would consider reconciling if my spouse got serious about making major changes. And the fourth is, I don't want the divorce, and I'd work hard to keep us together. So we developed that, and we've been doing national data collection with people already in the divorce process. And once again, we find that 25 to 35% of individual parents who fill this out do not say they're done. Do not say they're done. Okay? And when we do this in lawyers' offices, it's 45% of people who show up at the lawyer's office who are not sure they're done. Okay? And when we put people together as a couple, when we match them as a couple, so if you look at the bottom of page 24, which says couple match by, most of our data we only got from individuals, but we were able to match some people as couples. So what you see is both spouses check number one, that only 35% of the couples both checked, I'm done. 35%, only 35%. And then you look at one spouse was done and the other not, it was 50%. And then about 13%, both were ambivalent. They obviously weren't telling each other. Now, Judge Peterson, the one who got me into this, he just reminded me it was 10 years ago. Like, I was living a good life before that, okay? And now I end up in, meeting with a bunch of lawyers who hate me yesterday, okay? So he apologized to me for like you dragged me into this. I just realized that. The second judge has dragged me in. I used to be popular. No, I'm not anymore. Because the divorce industrial establishment assumes that if somebody goes to the lawyer, it's over. And the lawyer's job is to help them execute the amputation, the marriage-ectomy. Marriage-ectomy. See, in a consumer culture, if you're not happy, the solution to getting happy is to amputate your marriage-ectomy, as they call it. But Judge Peterson, one of the reasons he wanted to do this work with me, and he got in big trouble too, he's really unpopular. Actually, you are too. Anyway, I'm just making the connections. I hadn't seen that before. Loved but unpopular. What Judge Peterson said is that when people file for divorce, it's like getting on a superhighway with no rest stops or exit ramps. Boom. His other analogy is like a chute opening, pull you down. And when somebody says to their lawyer or mediator, I'm not so sure. Harry has actually ended the affair, and he's acting like he'd like to, I'm not so sure. What most of the professionals do is to say, keep moving. In fact, what the lawyers will say often is, your client is slowing things down. Your client is being troublesome. And at least in my part of the world, the judges want to clear cases. The judges are like homicide detectives. They want to clear cases. Okay? Get them all through. So this person, and in fact, they're almost told like pre-wedding jitters, like you're about to get married, and you say, I'm not so sure. Oh, it's normal. Just keep moving. Keep moving. The invitations have gone out. The bridesmaids' dresses have been ordered. Keep moving. Okay? Instead of saying, well, maybe this is something, maybe we should pause. Maybe we should have a pause, in that. So what we did was after this, we did this research, then I began to meet with a group of really good collaborative lawyers for over 2 years, and we developed a way to help lawyers assess whether there was ambivalence about the divorce. and we created something called discernment counseling, which is what we're looking to do, through Judge Philpott here. And discernment counseling is a way to help people slow down the divorce train, if they want, and take a 360-degree look at their relationship and decide whether they want to proceed towards a divorce or put it on hold, stop the train, and do 6 months of serious marriage counseling with divorce off the table to see if they can put their marriage into a place that would be good and healthy for both of them. And it's not the same as marriage counseling, because marriage counselors, and that's what I've done, and I train folks, when a couple comes in this category, we call mixed agenda couple. And that is, one is leaning out of the marriage, considering divorce, and is ambivalent about doing marriage counseling. And the other person really wants to save it. And by the way, in divorce, there's almost always a leaning out person who is leading the way and a leaning in person who doesn't want it. People do not sit down at the kitchen table one day and say, you think about divorce? Yeah, why don't we do it? Okay? No, somebody is thinking about it. It's a secret for a while. And so then they bring it up, and there's a crisis. And those couples fail in traditional marriage counseling because the leaning out person isn't sure they want to try. And they come and they go, all right, what do you got for me? Okay. So discernment counseling is this brief process, 1 to 5 sessions, that helps the leaning out person decide if they really want to try or not. And it helps the leaning in person bring their best self forward in the crisis to maximize the chance that their spouse will want to work with them. And we got research on that. We're training therapists around the country in this. And it's been helping marriage counselors because they get frustrated with these mixed agenda couples because it's just very unsatisfying. We have a pastoral version for clergy to be able to do 1 session. So you have a crisis couple come in. I work with a group of evangelical pastors for 3 years on this, and they have implemented this. The couple comes in, and how a pastor can lead them through a 2-hour conversation. You're talking with them mostly separately because they have different needs, right? One has to, they're thinking of leaving. The other wants to save it, so you meet with them separately as well as together. And the goal of that is to see if they'd be willing to commit to the effort. The goal is, in the pastoral version, is to create hope for the possibility of the marriage. Okay, not try to solve the problems, not marriage counseling, because what we found is most pastors can't do effective marriage counseling with these couples on the brink. They're too troubled. And so if you try to get in there and try to help them solve the problems, they blow right past you. They blow you out of the water. And so you do a discernment process. So what we're talking about here is in Judge Philpott's office is that when people come in and they go through this little ambivalence assessment, and if both people do not believe this is irretrievably broken down, so somebody is ambivalent about it, of having them do 1 session of discernment counseling to see if they could then decide whether they'd like to try to work on their marriage or proceed to the divorce. So the last thing I want to do with you, and this, I'm going to show you a little video, is sort of brand new data, just a few weeks old. We have this attitude assessment. It's the 4 attitudes. Basically, people are you done? Nothing's going to make you change your mind. Do you have mixed feelings about the divorce? Would you consider reconciling if your spouse made major changes, or you don't want the divorce? Those are the 4 attitudes. And so parents who are doing a online parent education program, it's used in a bunch of different states. It's called Children in Between Online. The originator of this really is interested in trying to help people reconcile if they don't, if they are not sure they want a divorce. By the way, divorce is an attempt to solve a problem that people don't think they can solve by staying married. That's what it is. Nobody gets married looking forward to getting divorced, right? they have hit a roadblock. They've hit a problem or a series of problems, and they don't think they can solve them by staying married. And so the idea is to see if people could see the possibility of a vision that they could solve the problem and stay married. That's how I think about divorce. Divorce is a problem-solving effort. Does that make sense? No, nobody wants it, but they feel like they can't stay here and be in. Okay, so in this program now, 1,500 parents every month are filling out that little attitude checklist. And again, 25 to 35% or so are not sure. These are people well into the process. So then I decided, and by the way, and it's part of a little 15-minute video module called Alternatives to Divorce. And then about 2 months ago, I said to my colleague, Don Gordon, how about if we give people the attitude assessment, they watch the video, the video about reconciliation, and then give them the attitude assessment again afterwards to see if it made a difference. See if a 15-minute exposure to a reconciliation message could shift any attitudes. So I'd like to show you the module. Now, I have to say in advance, it's me. It's low-tech, they call in Hollywood low production values. It's me in my office. The only advantage is I look better than I do here because I had makeup on. And I look better with makeup. But otherwise, so it's me talking to a camera, low tech, low production. So let's go. And if we get some lights here, too. And this is now being shown around the country, and we're hoping maybe, no, actually we need to back up to the beginning.
You check the first category. No. You are done with this marriage.
Yeah, so we need to go back
We
need to go back to the beginning of the, it's the alternative to divorce. You picked it up in the middle. Yeah. Okay. So just go back to Weebly.com. So take out the done and the HTML, and you'll get the first. And then at some point it'll stop and we'll go to. So hit that. Yeah. Okay. And so they begin here. Yeah. Begin here. Yeah. So we get the lights.
If you ask most couples on their wedding day if they think they will ever divorce, they'll tell you it's very unlikely. I'm Bill Doherty, and I'm a professor of family social science and director of the Couples on the Brink project at the University of Minnesota. I've been a marriage and family therapist for over 30 years, and I've worked with lots of couples considering divorce. This part of the course invites you to look at the option of reconciliation for your marriage. Now, only you know what's best in your situation, and no one is going to tell you to change your mind about getting divorced. But divorce is a decision with a lifetime of consequences, and it's best to be sure that it's the right thing to do. To begin, there are 4 important things to keep in mind. First, divorce is a way to solve a problem that people don't think they can solve by staying married. For some couples, divorce may indeed be the best option, but for other couples, there may be better ways to solve their problem. Second, once you file for divorce, the process can take on a life of its own, like getting on a high-speed highway with no rest stops or exits on the way. Divorce proceedings often create new conflicts that further convince people that they never should have married this person. Sometimes people think they're seeing their real spouse when, in truth, they're seeing someone caught up in a negative legal process. If you have children together, you'll have to work with each other for the rest of your lives anyway. You'll share hundreds of decisions and be at countless events from children's ball games to graduations and weddings and maybe even becoming grandparents someday. Can you think of events in the next 5 to 10 years where your children will really want you to cooperate? Which of these do you think may apply to your children? Finally, don't consider reconciliation if you or your children are being threatened physically, emotionally, or financially. Threats like this mean you have made the right decision to divorce. I now invite you to take a few moments to look again at whether divorce is the best solution for the problems in your marriage, or whether there are other solutions that can keep your marriage and family together. While divorce may bring relief from arguing or distance in your relationship, you may well be trading that relief for worry about your kids. Divorce puts children at higher risk for behavior problems, depression, school failure, substance abuse, delinquency, early sexual experiences, employment problems, and failure in their committed relationships and marriages later on. And a lot of research now shows that remarriage and step-family life come with a new set of challenges for children. In fact, kids on average are no better off in step-families than in single-parent families. My goal here is to encourage you to see divorce as a choice you are still making, rather than as something you have to do because you may have started down that path. I'll begin with research information and then ideas and resources based on your current feelings about your divorce. Across a number of polls, about 40% of divorced people say they have regrets about their divorce. More than half of already divorced people say they wish they and their spouse had worked harder to save their marriage. About 2/3 of people currently getting divorced think their divorce could have been prevented if one or both of them had worked harder to save their marriage. About 25% believe the marriage could still be saved if they both worked hard to make that happen. As for children, most people already know what researchers have found, that children do best when they grow up with parents who stay together in a good enough marriage. Recent studies have shown that marriage does not have to be highly happy for children to benefit, as long as the couple doesn't have high levels of chronic conflict. Children mainly need their parents to get along okay and raise them in a stable family. More than half of divorces are to couples in average marriages that fell apart over a year or two. This kind of divorce catches the children by surprise, and they begin distrusting their world and themselves.
I can't believe my parents wanted to get a divorce. They didn't fight. They got along. I had no idea anything was even wrong. I don't know if I can trust anything they tell me now.
A surprising number of people currently in the divorce process are open to reconciliation. Research with divorcing couples with children in Hennepin County, Minnesota, has found that in over 40% of couples, at least one spouse would be interested in a reconciliation service, and in about 10% of couples, both spouses express interest in a reconciliation service. Unfortunately, once divorce proceedings are underway, no one asks couples if they are open to trying to restore their marriage. Many people take this to mean that they are supposed to divorce once they've started the legal process, that it's the expected thing to do. In our research, about 50% of divorcing couples with children have had marriage counseling. Some couples decide to divorce because the counseling did not work. Unfortunately, there's a lot of ineffective marriage counseling by therapists who have little background and skill in this area, especially when working with couples on the brink of divorce. If you decide to explore reconciliation, there are special resources that might work when traditional resources have failed. Now I invite you to consider where you are personally in your attitude towards getting divorced. Here are 4 types of attitudes that we have found in our research. Please read all 4 and then check which one best fits you at this time.
Okay, so we go down here. Where's my guy? And down. I need my guy here. Okay. We need to scroll down, and then there are the lists there. So I don't know if we need to hit escape and then scroll down. But down below here are the categories. Okay, there we go. So yeah, keep going. There we go. So click there. So now we're going to show, see if you can pause it just for a minute. they click one of the 4 attitudes, and then they get a message that's tailored to that attitude. Okay? So we're going to click the one that says, I'm done. I'm done. Okay? And you'll see the message there. Yeah, that's fine. We need the audio.
This is going in a different direction from you now. Which is so fun.
Mom, you always seem to care about your own happiness. Do you think about us?
Be able to say that you did everything you could to keep your marriage together. It's particularly important to ask yourself if you have come to terms with your own contributions to the breakdown of the marriage. Therapists report that people who leave their marriage without working on themselves often just repeat the same mistakes in the next marriage. You can't divorce yourself. You take yourself with you into the new marriage. Affairs in particular are not a good way to end a marriage, and they usually do not lead to successful remarriages. If your spouse wants to save the marriage, have you given him or her a hearing in front of a counselor or clergy person and considered either a trial of marriage counseling, the marriage education course, a weekend couples retreat, or an online couples program? One more try with the right help could make a difference. If you remain convinced that divorce is the right option, and your spouse has a different attitude, then really use the skills in divorce. You might understand your spouse better and have a more constructive divorce. Parenting will definitely improve. Especially if your spouse was surprised by your decision and is resisting the divorce, it might be good to give him or her some time to accept what has happened. Compassion and time can make for a better divorce and a better co-parenting relationship.
And so we have one more. So see if you can scroll down this. Just an ending that everybody gets. See if we can find that here. Probably hit that arrow there. Well, we may have lost it there. Sorry, let's go back. There's an ending that everybody gets. No, well, you're going to, no, I'm sorry. Yeah, it's going to take you back. And then there's an ending. Okay. Yeah, so let's, thank you for that. So we're having a little technical problem. There's an ending that everybody gets that is a bit inspiring, I think, about what's involved in the possibility of reconciling. So everybody gets that. So everybody gets a particular message. So it's modest, low production values. It's just me talking to people. We were anticipating that maybe 5 to 10% of people, that would be like the best shot. You know, I thought 5%. My colleague Steve Harris thought maybe 10% of people who said they were done would shift to one of the other categories after this little modest thing. What we found, 50% of people shift from I'm done to one of those other attitudes. Now, a smaller number of people actually shift from ambivalence to saying they're done to 45% overall of people change their attitude towards their divorce after watching that And we left out, unfortunately, the kind of inspirational ending. But you get the basis of it. It's the research. It's challenging people who have decided to leave to ask if they've done everything they could. It's a technique I use with people I work with. Imagine your kids are age 25. They're thinking of getting married. And at that point, they're going to ask you, what was the story? And will you then be able to look them in the eye and say you did everything you could? It's a pretty powerful thing. The line about you can't divorce yourself, we carry ourselves with us into other relationships. So what we found is, with about 1,200 people, we're going to continue to gather data on this. A small, modest little, some of you may have gone to sleep during it was so modest, right? Little video has at least a short-term effect, and we're going to follow up and see, does anybody do anything with this? What does it really mean in terms of their future? So I'm not trying to inflate the impact of that because we have to follow up. But what it tells me, and this is the basis of the work that Judge Philpott and I are going to be doing here, is that in the words of Yogi Berra, I almost said Saint Yogi Berra, who's now dearly departed from us, it ain't over till it's over. And as a culture, and as the divorce industrial establishment believes, and as I used to believe as a marriage counselor for a lot of years, that once somebody says, no, I want a divorce, then you line up around that, and you help them go through the process in as constructive a way as possible. Okay? But it's the superhighway, and we now have very good research evidence to show. There's a lot more ambivalence out there, and there's a lot of volatility. 46% of people shifted their attitude after watching this little video. Okay? So there's something going on that we haven't really understood. And that what we owe people, and this is where faith communities could come into play too, is to create a holding environment for people who hit the pause button. Not an environment that says you have to reconcile, but a holding environment that says you're doing the right thing by slowing down, pausing, discerning, and we'll be with you. Because sometimes, tragically, they have to go through. I'm thinking about a wife whose husband was alcoholic and nasty. And in the first discernment counseling session, he agreed that he may have a problem. He would go to get an assessment for his alcohol. His wife was encouraged, and this is going to be a lawyer story. You were beating up on your... He went to his divorce lawyer and said, don't get the assessment because she could use that against you if there's a custody trial. He comes back in the second session. He's mean again. He's saying, I'm not, you're the one with the problem. And this woman couldn't go on anymore. Okay? So there are necessary divorces. A term I have coined is unnecessary divorces. Unnecessary divorces. And there are a lot of those. And we could do a lot more, including in our faith communities. But the point I want to end with here is that what I've learned in discernment counseling is to really empathize and appreciate the pain that people are in that makes them think of leaving their marriage. Most people do not do this lightly. And they need to be heard and understood and then offered hope. Not condemned, not judged for thinking of leaving. That does no good at all. It just drives them away. But understood, accepted, empathized with, and then helping them discern whether one last effort with good help, and if they're in a faith community with people surrounding them, one last effort. And if that doesn't work, if you're still miserable, if it's still, everything is, okay, then you have another choice to make. So it's been a great journey for me, these 10 years doing this work. I've learned a lot, and I'm happy to have gotten the call from Judge Philpott and Don Sizemore. So Don is he's the only trained discernment counselor in the state of Kentucky, right here in this room. So don't get in a traffic accident or anything like that, okay? But we're working with the University of Kentucky. We're hoping to train some more folks to create this holding environment when people hit the pause button. Josh Schulbut's going to help them you're going to tell sometimes to hit the pause button. And to go through a discernment process so that whatever they decide to do, they will be able to say to their 25-year-old kids, we handled this responsibly. We did our best during this crisis. So thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
We had somebody new come in the room, Lavinia Spirito. Welcome, Lavinia. She's one of the lawyers I see every week in court. You also tell them what you do. You teach a Bible study for a whole lot of mostly Catholic ladies, right? Tell them what you do.
For the past 16 years, I've been teaching an ecumenical Bible study, Catholic and non-Catholic, and we do a book of the Bible. We use the BSF pattern, but the content is tweaked a little bit, and we've had a lot of success.
And how many ladies do you talk to?
Well, it's men and women, and it's national.
Men and women, okay.
We're in 40 states now. We're in the Philippines. We're in Europe. So, there's a need for it. So
she's on the radio, and she's a guardian she's taking care of kids in my course, too. We give her all the Spanish-speaking cases because she's fluent in Italian and Spanish. That helps. I mean, we're not all rednecks in Kentucky. A few of us. Now, she's a blessing to our community, and it's interesting. A lot of people don't even know her. So thank you for coming.
thanks, John.
I put here, by the way, page 7, recommended reading. On a website that I'm going to have related to my book, I'll have other stuff. But I started with, these are just books. This is stuff that got me started. Stephanie Coontz, a big book on the history of marriage. I've got Bill Doherty. I just picked one of your books, Bill. Gene Edwards. If you've never read anything by Gene Edwards, oh my Lord. Let's see, do I have it here? Anyway, The Divine Romance. Mind-boggling book. Lots of his books are mind-boggling. John Eldredge will change your life if you give him a chance. Anthony Esselin, Catholic, I think. Very profound stuff. Elizabeth Fox Genevieve. Mitchell Nance got me onto her. Never heard of her until you said you got to read this book, right? And then Robert George from Princeton. Dennis Kinlaw, whose books are on that table over there. Okay, go read all of that. George Weigel.
His Old Testament book, I just saw, has a chapter or two on Hesed.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
One of those books has a terrible title, but it's it's fantastic. Lectures on Old Testament.
Well, that's the one. Lectures on Old Testament Theology.
Yeah, doesn't that sound exciting?
But there's several chapters on Hesed and covenant.
That's where I got that. I mean, it's fantastic. And then George Weigel, another Catholic priest kind of person, who wrote the biography of Pope John Paul II and the Theology of the Body. And then Barbara Defoe Whitehead, one of your colleagues who does a lot of research and stuff. There's a lot of stuff on this subject. And I'm hoping that our world, I call our world, will get educated so that we don't have to lose all the debate. We don't have to lose all the debate. Okay, we're going to have lunch. Mike, give us some direction on where the food
I've got this chicken and chicken nuggets and fruit salad and back on the back table. There's still some snacks in the corner over there if you want some water, fresh coffee and hot water for tea back here on the other side. I have 2 salads, but we have 2 people that are soy, gluten, peanut, dairy, eat cardboard for lunch.
Who are those 2 people?
Whoever you are.
I mean, there's one. Jenny, she's that same way, our gal here. So, but I've got 2 salads in there for the 2 of you, if there's 2 here. So, and I thought they had dressing on them, some kind of something they said was soy-free, but I'm not sure it looks like there's anything on it. So it may just be grass. Let me know. Come see me. I'll get it for you.
So we'll take about 30 minutes, eat lunch, relax, talk to people, make connections that you need to make. I know a lot of you all will want to figure out how to stay in touch with Dr. Doherty or FRS or each other. And then when we come back, as you're kind of finishing up lunch, you can start the video with Dr. Kinlaw and go from there. Okay? Thank y'all. Oh, we need a prayer. We need a blessing for the food, I'm told. So, therefore, Lord Jesus, we thank you for what we are learning. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done on this earth as it is in heaven. Keep us healthy now with this food, which we thank you for. In Jesus' name, amen. Amen.
Mitchell, Nick. You are so encouraging. Your face
I'm sorry, man.
Sorry, did you have an accident? Yes. And a very good purpose too. And for your, I call it ministry.
Yeah, that's right. They like that.
Yeah.
that could be groundbreaking.
Yeah.
There.
help me pass these out.
Yes, sir.